Hello, and welcome to our first transformative leadership panel of 2025, Courageous Crossroads, Navigating the Decision to Leave and Lead. I'm Michelle Dilley, CEO of Awesome. For those of you who may not be familiar with Awesome, which stands for Achieving Women's Excellence in Supply Chain Operations, Management, and Education, it's the preeminent women's professional group for the supply chain industry, with more than 1,500 senior women leaders that make up our organization. Our goal is to advance and transform the future of supply chain leadership. And one of the ways that we do this is by hosting virtual events like today's panel, where senior women leaders in the supply chain industry can come together and share their insights on hot topics that are running rampant through our industry and beyond. In today's conversation, we're going to be diving into the topic of career transitions. For all leaders, making the decision to leave an organization when it's not working can be extremely difficult. Change is never easy, and building up the courage to either advocate for yourself or take a huge leap into the unknown can be really, really challenging. So today, we've gathered together a group of remarkable women who are going to be sharing their own personal stories about career transitions and their best practices on making these very strategic career moves. So joining us today, I'd like to welcome, first we have Lynn Coughlin, who is founder, president, and board director of Great Circles Associates. Lynn, welcome. Lillian Dukes, who's owner and chief transformation officer of LAD Consulting. Hi there, Lillian. And lastly, we've got Susan Pilecchio, who is a supply chain executive who's been with companies like Staples, Starbucks, C&S Wholesale Grocers, Blue Triton Brands, and others. So thank you, Susan. I really can't wait for us to get started and for all of you to be able to hear the insights of these wonderful women. But before we get going on the conversation, just a little bit of housekeeping. As the panelists are talking, we encourage you to utilize the chat functions and please submit any questions that you have through the Q&A function. During the Q&A portion at the end of our programming, we'll be able to answer as many of your questions as possible. So let's go ahead and get started. We decided to change things up a little bit to start off the conversation. We really want to make sure that we're touching on topics that are meaningful and important to what you want to hear and tailor the advice and the best practices to meet your needs and interests. So instead of jumping right into the conversation, we're first going to begin with a level setting poll for all of you to take. So my question for you is, what is or has been your biggest motivator in wanting to leave an organization? And you can see here the different topics. So professional stagnation, leadership issues, misalignment of values and ethics, toxic work environment, compensation and benefits, work-life balances, or others. So if you could please submit your poll response, that would be great. We'll give it just another second. Okay. Thank you for participating. And as you can see, we've got some pretty close ones here. So professional stagnation, leadership issues, toxic work environment tend to be our top ones. Excellent. Thank you so much for sharing that response with us. So with that, I'm going to start off this conversation with Lillian. Lillian, when we were preparing to have this conversation, we talked about how sometimes at work, we can feel off balance or out of sorts, like something isn't working. And we're not sure if we're imagining things, if it's really the environment, or, is it just us thinking things are happening that maybe aren't? And you had some really amazing insights to identify some of the signals that you saw when you knew it was an indicator that a role was no longer working for you. So can you share some of your thoughts on that?
Sure, I'd be happy to. And I'm glad to be here today, everyone.
Thank you.
For me, my experience has been this thing that feels out of balance or out of alignment tends to be with my goals and my values. Are my career goals still being met? Am I on track for the right career path? Are the organizational values still in alignment with what I believe? And when I don't see that or feel that, then I start to get red flags. So as you start to look into that, and I've talked to a number of people and gotten feedback from people on issues that they're going through in the workplace, I'm hearing more concerns about environments that people are in.
Mm.
They're under a lot of stress. That stress is translating into their home life. They are having health issues, they're having mental health issues. There are a number of things that are going on that are giving them indicators that, something is out of alignment here, something is wrong, and you probably need to step back and and take a look and do something about it. And a lot of times you want to think, well, maybe I'm imagining that. Well, that's where, reaching out to those trusted advisors and mentors and things and talking to them about, hey, here's what's going on. Is it just me or is there something else that I'm missing? Some of the indicators you can look for is, is your organization trying to gently move you out of the organization? And some of those signs would be things like being left out of conversations, or people working around you and going directly to your employees instead of coming to you as they have in the past. Are you conveniently being left out of meetings? Um, so there are indicators that say something has changed or something is different here. I probably need to take note and figure out what that is, but don't just brush it off like it's a figment of your imagination.
Excellent. Yeah, I think those are all really great indicators. So, to put you a little bit on the spot, so when you realized that you saw some of these signs when you were experiencing them, what did you do? Like, what were some of the first steps that you took personally?
So they were different steps. If it was a situation where I was feeling stagnant,
Hmm.
then I started to assess what was I looking for? What was that next step for me that I wasn't seeing available where I was? So did that look like a move into another part of the organization? Did that look like a move to another company, to another role? So that's one set of assessments I go through. If it's the other where you're getting clear indications within the organization that this no longer fits, and I'll give you an example. I had a boss, a new boss into the organization, and he decided that and it was something he brought with him from his military time. And I have this, I know this in no way reflects our military personnel and leaders from the military. He had his own way of doing things, but he created what you call the murder board.
Oh,
And it's like the murder. It's like I should have known that nothing good can come out of anything that's called the murder board. But we had to go through this process to in order as a prep for presenting to executive leadership. I had a employee who I thought would be a good opportunity to give him some visibility and elevate some of the projects he was working on. And it was the most unprofessional and aggressive um, experience I had ever had.
mm,
The person was totally deflated. I felt bad for putting him in that situation. And I never would have imagined or expected something like that to happen. But it was an indicator to me that the values of the organization had shifted. It wasn't about taking care of your employees, respecting people, treating people like they should be treated. And that was a clear sign to me it was time for me to leave.
hmm. That's a great example. Thank you for sharing that story. Lynn or Susan, do you have anything else you'd like to add about maybe a situation that you were in where you noticed some signs and did something about it? Susan, you're on mute.
Hi
There we
everyone.
go.
Hi.
Now we're
Okay.
off mute.
Great.
It's a pleasure to be here with you, and I'm looking forward to the next hour or so. Um, so I got to a point in my career where, parenthetically, I had been very blessed moving through my career, but I got to a point in my career where I had a fair amount of responsibility and was being put in situations that required the consideration of making changes to continuously improve, to execute on big, bold strategies like a rebranding activity. And what I found as I was becoming more senior was that there was much more pushback from my peers and those senior to me around the prospect of change. And some of you might be experiencing that yourselves. Change is not doesn't come easy for most human beings. Some human beings it does, but for most human beings it doesn't. And certainly in organizational settings, it can feel threatening, to say the least, on a whole lot of levels, which I'm sure many of you can probably relate to. But I found that I was really getting more and more pushback, and that was getting to be frustrating because I wasn't feeling like I could contribute I wasn't able to contribute the way I knew I should be contributing. And it frankly gave me pause, and it occurred over the course of probably a year. And as the year wore on, I became more and more discouraged, if you will. But there finally was a situation, a big problem that occurred that needed solved, that I was able to play a role in helping to solve with a lot of other people. And it went a long way to legitimizing me in terms of some of the changes that I had been wanting to make otherwise, that some of which were related to the solving of this problem. So it definitely was a sign for me when I began feeling that I couldn't get done what I knew I was able to get done, but not because it wasn't the right thing to do, but because my peers and those senior to me struggled with it. And it was taking a lot of time and effort to convince them that change was a good thing, so forth and so on. But I would say if you get to that point, it's definitely a red flag, but it's not necessarily a showstopper.
So I'll jump in and just give a little bit of context. So I think both Lynn and Lillian, what you've shared resonates with me. And I would imagine amongst many folks on the call, there's tenets of this that is relatable by many. I think for me, it's taken different facades or different shapes, if you will. In certain environments, I was being held directly accountable. I was operating at the EVP level, so with my peer group of EVPs, mostly male, but for HR and legal, and being held directly accountable for areas that were completely outside of my control, or area of responsibility. And as a consequence of that, really not holding my peer executive male accountable for what was his direct area of control. So, being a team player, I went through and I put in a lot of heavy lifting with putting in the disciplines of what we needed to do to pull off this particular feat. And it was very customer facing. So I won't go into the specifics of that, but I basically put the ball on the tee and then said, okay, the ball's on the tee. I went so far as to describe the functional accountabilities of each player in this game, because there were different responsibilities by executive player, and very professionally kind of put that there and kind of handed it back. But it wasn't taking any traction. And then I'd find myself in certain board meeting environments where I was being directed questions specific to this area, which obviously I fielded the questions professionally, but it was very indicative of, we're not holding people's feet to the fire in the respective functions they have the accountability to lead. And that's a problem on many dimensions.
Thank you for sharing that. And my apologies, our internet went out, so I went offline for a little bit, but you guys are pros and you kept it going, so I appreciate that.
You froze.
I know, I was like, we had a little bit of a technical glitch, but you know, we deal with this all the time as supply chain
That's
professionals.
right.
You got to
We
be
all
agile
do.
and flexible, so
We all
kept the show
do.
going. Thank you. So I want to talk now a little bit about sometimes we face some external pressures when, you know, Lynn, you had commented about, you know, feeling things were getting harder and harder, and change is hard for people, and, you know, just different circumstances that arise. And, you know, women, I think we're so often at times can be encouraged to just stay in the situation and kind of tough it out. And I'm going to give an example personally that happened to me where I was with an organization, and I knew it was time for me to go. Like, I had felt like the culture wasn't the culture that I had joined in the beginning, and didn't necessarily want to be part of the senior leadership group the way that it was going with the individuals that they were bringing on at the top. My husband also worked for the same company, who was very adverse to change. So I am all about change agent. Like, I love change, right? But not everybody does. Not everybody's
You're
comfortable
a
with that.
woman after my own heart, Michelle.
So, you know, it came down to this really tough decision of, you know, he wanted me to stay and I couldn't stay and continue to be fulfilled as a leader professionally and personally. And it was really, really difficult, challenging time for me and for our family and for my husband and our marriage, because he couldn't understand why, you know, I was running a global organization. You know, you're very comfortable with our life, and he couldn't understand why that couldn't be enough for me, and why I needed to find other opportunities to grow as a leader, and to take the experiences that I had and move into something else. And so, you know, I think that I'm not alone in feeling that way. And I think that I'm not alone in having those circumstances. And Lynn, you know, you as an executive coach, I think you have a really unique perspective on this. So can you share some of the data that you shared with us in preparing for this about how women leaders and women in the C-suite, like, how they're feeling about these types of pressures, how they're feeling about what you shared with us about imposter syndrome and things like that?
Of course, of course. First of all, just to put things in perspective, I've for many years been a big advocate of the empowerment of women in business. And so I've spent a lot of time researching the differences between men and women and how we lead and those kinds of things. And um, it's an absolute truism that women really are great change makers. They are, and it has a lot to do with how collaborative women tend to be. Because when you get into wanting to affect big change that is going to be threatening by definition to folks, there's a whole path that you have to follow that is all around encouraging and exciting other people, inspiring other people around the why of the change and the benefits of it and what's in it for them. making sure that they feel like they're potentially going to be part of the change, that kind of thing. And you it can be hard to do that. It can be very hard to do that, and you really have to develop your diplomacy skills and that kind of thing. But women have those skills. Women are great networkers. We know that women are great networkers. Women know how to connect dots. Women are strategic thinkers. They know how to connect dots and see things in context, which is just a great quality about being a woman leader. Not to say that men don't as well. There are many very, very capable men who are leading great big audacious change initiatives, but in total there's not enough change makers. And what's happened is over time is that women are not progressing particularly in large organizations. They get to the middle management level, and they stop. If they don't stop, they slow down significantly in terms of their rise in an organization. So that today, if we look at the Fortune 100 companies, we're actually going in the wrong direction in terms of the percentage of CEOs who are women. It went up for a few years. It got up to, I think, as high as about 11-12%, something like that. And now it's down to something like 9 or 10%. But the even more disturbing fact there is that women are not making it into operating roles that where there's a P&L responsibility. When they rise in organizations, they tend to rise and go into staff roles. So the head of HR or general counsel role, which isn't a bad thing, by the way, but it's not, for most people, that path will not get you into a CEO role if that's your goal. And so we've got kind of a double whammy issue, which is that women are not progressing the way men are in organizational settings. And when they do, they're progressing more into staff roles than they are operating roles, which again isn't necessarily a bad thing. But for some people it is. For some people who really want to be in an operating role, it can be very challenging. What happens when you experience being slighted constantly in your career is that you start to experience self-doubt. And this is where imposter syndrome comes in. And it's a terrible problem that men and women have in organizational settings, mostly women, but about 60% of leaders have experienced imposter syndrome at some point in their careers. And it's this syndrome of feeling like you're not worthy of your job. You're not worthy of doing bigger and better and more things. And it can be, if you can't snap out of it, and there are ways to do that, but if you can't snap out of it, it can be a real problem for men and women, but especially for women.
You know, that number is staggering, 60%. I wish our male colleagues would talk more about it, because I feel like the imposter syndrome tends to get pinned on women more than men. But I
That's
do
right,
think
Michelle.
both leaders see it. So that is a staggering number. When we were prepping, I was so shocked by that.
Think about all the productivity that is not happening because
Yeah.
people stop in their tracks. They doubt themselves, and they don't have the courage of their conviction in many cases to forge forward. I mean, it's a huge, huge issue, in my view, in organizational settings that has all to do with how we go about becoming much more innovative, much more productive, et cetera, et cetera.
I think when you think about environments that people are in that are not supportive of the individuals, if it's a environment that's not healthy, that can tend to make people feel inadequate.
That's
Mhm.
right.
And the
Well
longer you
put.
stay in that environment, the more you believe it. So when people are challenged with, do I stay, do I go? You've got to think about your own mental health and how you see yourself in that environment. Because if you don't think you're worthy or you're capable enough, it's going to make it even harder for you to leave. So you've got to be really careful about just sitting and staying in an environment like that because it will work against you.
And the first
What
thing to do if you get to that point is to think very seriously about your strengths, because we tend not to think about our strengths when we have feelings of inadequacy. And the fact is that we all have a short list of highly leverageable strengths that have helped us get where we are and that will help us continue to help us. But it's if you get into that situation, you don't want to you don't want to stay there. You want to do everything you can to get your head
Mhm.
out of feeling a sense of inadequacy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. That's what I was going to ask is, what can we do? And what I found is not only myself identifying my strengths, but ask trusted colleagues and others, what do they see? Because that just helps reinforce it. Or they may see something that I didn't recognize that is kind of an aha discovery as well. So I think that
That's
that's
right,
great
Michelle.
advice.
It's really important to know what your strengths are.
Yep,
Really important to know what your strengths are.
absolutely. So I want to talk a little bit more about as we're faced with some of these issues that we've been discussing in our careers. What other types of resources did you find helpful as you were going through this? And Lillian, I'm going to start with you. So as you were facing issues of, am I in the right job? Am I in the right position? Should I transition, etc.? I know that you had mentioned some of the resources that you use. Could you share those with us?
Yeah, it's a time when I really lean on mentors. I had an executive coach for probably 20 years. I lean heavily on her. I've got people in my network that when I need to bounce ideas off or say, hey, this is what's going on. Am I imagining this? Is this real? What should I do? And those are the people that can help talk you through whether it's a situation that you can deal with getting with your boss and laying out a plan for what you should do in terms of whether it's a career situation or a interpersonal situation with colleagues. Um, and then if you get to the point you decide it's I've got to go, it's time for me to do something else, they can help you from that perspective as well. I had a situation with a former boss where I was really being harassed in my role. It was just getting to the point that, I wake up in the morning, I was sick to my stomach, I did not want to go in. And I went to him, I said, look, this is what's happening. I get these full-on attacks in meetings. And I said, it's uncalled for, it's unprofessional, it's uncalled for. And there's specifically two colleagues that were doing it. And so he brought us all in. He was very diplomatic. You guys, this is what you should do. And my expectation is you're going to figure this out and figure out how to work better together. So I assume we're going off to work this plan. I was the only one trying to work that plan. So the bad behavior continued, but I got to the point where I knew I was not going to come out on the right side of things in that situation. I was going to um, cause myself some issues from a health perspective.
Mm.
You know, when you wake up in the morning and you feel sick, just even before you get out of the bed because you've got to go back in there, you finally decide is I can do what I do somewhere else in an environment where I'm respected. And so I left. I made a plan to leave. I left. And my boss found out after I left that those two individuals were also harassing other people that they were trying to get out of the organization.
Wow.
So trust your instincts. It's not, you know, oh, you keep hearing me saying a figment of your imagination because there's so many times I thought things were just, you know, a mirage. Of course, this isn't really happening, you know. And then I would get with some friends from school. We went together and we worked in different industries and things, and we would start sharing notes about some challenges we have. And it's like, well, wait a minute, I'm going through that same thing. And it's like, wait a minute, I am too. And we were all experiencing similar things in different places, had no idea. But through that ability to lean on that community and identify how do you deal with this? How do you move forward? How do we keep each other strong?
Mhm.
Was very helpful. So it's not a time to try to go that alone. Um, trust your mentors, your network. Um, that's what they're there for.
Absolutely. Susan, how about you? You're on mute.
Mute. I got
There
it.
you go.
Thank you. Once again, I'm on mute.
It's okay.
Yeah, I think, you know, what I think is when I think about toxic operating cultures and really poor leadership, which tends to ride together, you know, what you end up finding in that environment is, which is when it's kind of really been in really, really the toxicity has really seeped into the organization, is you've got people that are just keeping their heads down, you know, and so there's no momentum to change what is, which is sad, because I think this is just my own personal leadership constitution, and I know, you know, it's not for everyone, but I'm not that leader. If I see something that can be made better, and I have diplomacy and fortitude to go with, then I'm going to try to change the way, because if you've got a toxic work culture and you've got some forms of abuse in an environment, nobody's doing their best work. Everybody's hiding under the radar. Results suffer immensely. It's just never mind what Lillian and Lynn described, because that's a never mind, meaning that matters first and foremost is the dignity and the health of our associates. And sometimes it's really, I'm going to use the word pathetic, to see other leaders that are fully aware of what's happening and they're keeping their head down. Now, that's a problem too, because sideliners in a toxic work environment don't help the cause.
Right.
But I think, you know, you can probably count on the fact that that's likely the scenario, because the reality is, I think few leaders will stand up and stand tall against matters like this in a company, in the spirit of trying to help out, right? There's a risk that goes with that. And there are leaders that are willing to take that risk because they don't want to stay in a place that acts and behaves like this. So it's complicated. And, you know, you kind of throw in the role of HR. If anybody, you know, wants to go there, let's not go there for too long. We'd really sidetrack ourselves. You know, there's a role I think that HR should play in maintaining and holding people accountable towards having a positive operating culture, because it impacts results all day long. But that's not the role, generally speaking. And typically one can find that HR is remaining as quiet as the next leader to their left or right. And that's a shame. And at some point, maybe we can move that needle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think when
Definitely.
people are trying to decide, the environment I am, is it a corporate culture
Mhm.
or is it just a bad boss?
Right,
Because it
right,
Yeah.
could be one or the other.
It
That's
could
very
be
true.
both too.
Right.
right.
If exactly, if you're thinking of, is this corporate culture? What's the tone at the top? Because bad behavior at the top is just going to trickle down.
Mm-hmm.
If it's related to just your boss, are you seeing your boss's peers act in the same way? Are you seeing that person's boss act in the same way? So you kind of have to deduce, where the problem is. And if it's a corporate issue, then the question is that a corporate culture you want to be in or not?
Yeah, that's a great point, Lillian, because it can't just be a bad individual. And like some of you have shared, once you decided to transition, then that person was exposed. And, Lillian, in your example, that person was exposed as a bad leader. And, hopefully the right actions were taken from that. But you do need to evaluate if it's the overall culture from the senior leadership group or just one individual.
Yeah.
But and I think it's really important. We talked about the importance that mentors can play in being sounding boards, both internal in the company as well as external, and networks, right? Like, so you can have your group of individuals that are kind of, I'll call them my board of directors, right? I always identify my personal board of directors
Mm-hmm.
that have been so valuable in helping me evaluate circumstances and situations to whether or not to make the transition or stick it out, because it could just be a bad boss that it's just a matter of time before they're discovered and they're on their way. And so really making sure that you have those people around you that are trusted advisors that you can go to get insight and input from is really, really critical. And it served me well as I needed to do that throughout my career.
Yeah.
Inside and outside of your organization.
Mhm.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about, I'd love to have each of you share maybe some best practices that you've learned as you've made some significant transitions in your careers. And how has that helped you? And more importantly, how has maybe that helped to evolve your leadership style, reflecting back now? Susan, let's start with you.
Sure. So I have been, I really feel lucky and blessed to have operated in all sorts of different companies, between, Starbucks and Staples and CNS Wholesale Grocers and Blue Triton brands. And, it's all about the path that you can help create for yourself going forward. And of course, it involves obviously doing your best work, being authentic, helping other people, having, camaraderie. But I think it's really, lateral moves. I would just say, when I reflect back on my career, one of the areas that I'm most pleased about in my personal development is the fact that I have taken so many lateral careers in one particular company. Staples being my longest tenured company, I had many lateral careers. So I started in finance, but from there I went to so many different places at the vice president level. And again, I could consider those non-promotional moves when I left finance to go into contract sales, or left contract sales to go into staples.com and be responsible for merchandising the site, cross-channel promotions, to stepping out a role when we purchased Corporate Express, a company of like size, and led the integration, which was absolutely an HR-ish role. But those for me have given me great joy and continues to sharpen my skills. I think everything's figure outable, and I love building. I love the heavy lift. And I also love working with people. It's a team sport. So I would say to you, especially in light of some layoffs of late and perhaps a soft economy, don't underestimate the lateral move. When you can remove yourself from the very discipline you were schooled on or have your experience in, and use your raw skill sets to go into a completely different operating discipline. I think it's very powerful. And I also think it really enables somebody to understand from an end-to-end perspective how the company operates. And I think it's invaluable both within the company and when you choose to leave the company.
I think that's great advice. I wholeheartedly agree with everything that you said. Lynn, how about you?
Yes, yes. Well, I might come at this from the standpoint of being a change maker.
Mm-hmm.
So when I go into an organization in a situation that involves, in my case, it would be most likely facilitating a situation with a leadership team or others that involves the need to make big, big change to a business model for any number of reasons. The first thing that I do, that I've learned over time, that I absolutely have to do, is gain the trust of key stakeholders. I need to figure out who those stakeholders are, not only above me, but as peers and below me, and who have those stakeholders are those who would have who would be affected or would affect a potential big change. And they really need to know pretty quickly that you're not out for their job, that you're not out to make their lives difficult, what have you, that you're really out to make everybody's life better, actually. So trust is really, really important. And one way that I've learned to gain the trust of others pretty quickly is to find opportunities to make commitments to others, to do something for them, be it a peer, a senior, even someone junior to me. And to find an opportunity to make a commitment to them and not only follow through on it, but exceed that person's expectation. And when you start to develop a reputation as someone who is not afraid to be accountable, who is clearly responsible, who is all about helping you to look good, all of a sudden people start listening to you. They start asking you questions. They start seeking you out. They start acknowledging that, well, maybe this change could have these following benefits and we could be better as an enterprise as a result of it. So the trust and commitment are the two big lessons for me.
Excellent. I love what you just said. I love the part about, coming at it from the change agent perspective and finding the stakeholders or finding the influencers, right?
That's
Finding the
right.
people and I know that in looking down in the organization, because if you've ever been on a manufacturing floor or a warehouse floor, you can easily see kind of who are those silent leaders that they don't have the title, but they have the influence and the power, and seeking those individuals out, helping them understand kind of maybe what some of the resilience is to the change, and then working with them and really valuing them as a key individual influencer and stakeholder to help drive change, I think is so impactful. So thank you
I
for
call them passionate champions, Michelle.
love that. Excellent.
Nice.
Very good. And Lillian, what advice do you have?
Well, all of my experiences, good, bad, the ugly, have all helped shape my leadership style significantly. Starting out in engineering, and most people know engineers don't have the best soft skills. So it's something we really have to work on. So I really had to work on that over the years. I feel I've grown into a lot more empathetic person, a lot more intentional about creating environments where others feel supported within the organization. I've learned that from leadership is not just by guiding others, but also knowing when to seek guidance myself. because there are times I need help in the midst of whatever's going on. Um, I think that humility and willingness to listen has made me a much stronger and adaptable leader.
Wonderful. So our little Q&A chat thing is blowing up. So we're going to now shift to some of the questions that we've gotten from the people who are participating today. And I want to first start off with one, Lynn, I'm going to target this one to you.
Okay.
This individual was laid off by their company last year and found themselves experiencing a bottleneck in advancing to a more senior position within the industry. So the question is, do you have any advice on how to break this barrier, especially in a really tough job market?
Sure. Well, I'm going to first of all go right back to what Susan's excellent advice,
Uh-oh.
which no,
I'm
it's
kidding.
really good advice, Susan, which is there might be a message here for you, my friend, that is the person who's asking the question, which is that maybe you're at a point in your career where it would be highly beneficial for you to take on a different type of role, a role that would give you a very different perspective on a supply chain system or whatever it is, or a particular business model, all in the spirit of becoming a holistic leader who can who really can think and behave about the business because you've spent time understanding and being in various parts of the business. So I would say that's one thing I would say. Give consideration
Absolutely.
to thinking about a whole different role. And in that regard, it's really important to get clear about your purpose. What's your purpose? Write it down. Get a trusted colleague or mentor to work with you to write down your purpose. It's going to help you a lot then to think about, okay, what are options other than becoming a vice president of marketing? I'm a director of marketing now in a D2C business. I want to become a vice president of marketing. Maybe once you really go deep on your purpose and think about your strengths, you may find that there are other opportunities for you that will afford you, in fact, much greater learning and advancement than staying focused on, if you're call it a director of marketing, wanting to become a VP of marketing. There's just and particularly in a world that's changing as rapidly as ours, and where things are as fluid and uncertain and volatile and ambiguous, there's opportunity for so many people who really don't realize it because they haven't done the job of going deep with their strengths and really getting clear about their purpose.
If I can add
Yeah.
add
Oh, go ahead,
something
Lynn.
to that, when you talk about either being laid off already or leaving one job for another, it is very hard to move into a promotional opportunity if you don't have that sponsorship coming into the new company.
Yeah.
You're an unknown quantity. People are going to be a bit reluctant to take a chance on you if they don't know you and if there's not someone speaking on your behalf. So if that's what you've been trying to do and that's not working out, then take a look, as the ladies have said, and transition in some kind of a lateral role in order to get into an organization. The other thing is work your network. This was promoted on LinkedIn, so we have LinkedIn networks. Search it for where people in your network work. Use that network to find connections in the companies that you're trying to get into and make that network work for you.
Good
Excellent.
advice.
Absolutely. Okay, I like this question. So they ask, what are questions that you like to ask during an interview to understand that if a company or a team that you're applying to work for will have the culture and management that works for you? That's a good one.
So that is a good one. And in this day and time, it's a very important one too.
It is. Any thoughts or key questions come to mind?
I have a couple of thoughts, and I'll make it short. In the world we live in, the transparent world we live in, I would not be shy about sharing your own values and
Mm.
and talking about how they manifest in your life as part of the interview in certain situations, but call it the three values that are most important to you. And because you've got a big stake in that audience getting to know you and who you are. And so you as a person, and if you can start to relate to the person who's interviewing you on a level that's more about that your values and your the cultural norms that you're accustomed to, say, in an organizational setting, you will very definitely be able to ferret out what you're potentially looking at in terms of a culture.
Yeah. And I think, Lynn, adding on to that, that's when you're seeking employment, you should absolutely be going, learn as much as you can about the company's values through mission statements, media, their website, and find out a lot about it. And if there's a gray area that you want to explore during an interview, you can ask an open-ended question in support of your values, because it does matter. And it does matter for sure.
Really does. And so
It
does our
does.
purpose. And so does our purpose.
Mm-hmm.
And it one last thing there too. And if you're not sure how to structure those questions, if you are not currently using an AI platform like ChatGPT or something else to ask the question, what kind of questions should I ask a company concerning to assess their culture? You are behind the power curve.
There you
Use the
go.
tools that are out there.
Yeah.
These things are a wealth of information.
So some of you may know this and some of you may not, but Lillian is a master at using AI and to get information out. I mean, she really is masterful. So if you are not linked into her, link into her, and you have questions, she can help you with all of that.
Congratulations, Lillian.
What do you think?
So we also have some of our earlier professionals that have joined the webinar today. So this question comes from an individual. So they state, I'm new in my career and have been working for the same company since graduation. I have fear about leaving my job because I'm unsure how other companies operate, and I wonder if I'll regret leaving the company that I'm in. However, I've heard a lot of good things from other companies. What advice do you have for people very early in their career and want to make their first big jump to another company? How should I go about researching companies and positions to apply for?
Can I take that one?
Chat
So,
GPT.
we
Yeah.
just talked about one of the key elements that you need to do is researching the culture of the company. That is going to be so important where we are today, that you have a clear understanding of where that company stands, what they believe in, what they support, what they don't support, how would you be supported as an individual, those types of things. With that in mind, since you say you are early in your career, now is the time to take the leap. Now is the time to take the risk, because once you get down the road and you may get married and you have children, you have responsibilities for parents or things of that nature, the decision to do that gets a lot more difficult.
Mm-hmm.
So while you are unencumbered, take the leap. It does feel scary. All change feels scary, I know, but you will regret it if you don't.
Absolutely. And there's so much more information today about companies, and being able to find people who work there to, like we talked earlier, use your network to find the people who work in the companies and ask them kind of behind the scenes, how's it really going? But there's so much more information out there today than we've
Oh,
ever had
Mhm.
that's available to you from as a
Places like
resource.
Glassdoor,
Mm.
you have employees putting reviews about the company on there. There are other sites that provide information like that. Yeah.
Excellent. So I have one more question as we're kind of wrapping up and we're getting to the top of the hour that I want each of you to actually respond to. So what are some tips and tricks that you can share that have helped you find your voice as a female leader? And Susan, I'll start with you.
Boy, I feel like my foundational starting point on that is all about, the way I was raised. My mom and dad both worked. They both held down the household. I've had brothers and sisters and shot BB guns and played with Barbie dolls. I feel like I've been blessed with no inhibitions relative to what I can and where I can and cannot venture, what I can and cannot become. So I feel really lucky about that. I probably would add on after somebody else jumped in on this one a little bit more. Michelle, I don't know if you want,
One of the things that came to mind as I was
Yeah.
thinking about this is I know that I've sat in meetings where I would say something and 2 minutes later, one of my male colleagues will have said the exact same thing, and all of a sudden everybody steps up and pays attention, right? And like that is like so maddening to me. It's like, wait a minute, like I just said that. And so for a long time I would just sit back and be like, okay, whatever. But I found like that's not okay. And so I would be like, oh, so and so, I'm so glad that you heard my point that I made earlier about X,
Good
Y, and Z,
girl.
Yeah.
to just say, like, I have a voice as a female leader. I said that. And, if nobody else in the room is going to acknowledge it, and sometimes, you will have other colleagues that will say, that's a great point that you're building off of what Michelle just made earlier. But if nobody is stepping up and saying that, I think that you need to empower yourself to say, I really appreciate that you share my point of view that I just talked about, right? And do it in a very positive, proactive way. But I think that that's been one of the ways that I've found that's been successful for me to be able to use my voice as a female leader when sometimes it's overshadowed.
I love that. I have a little anecdote to add then that I think emphasizes what you're saying in tools of the trade, if you will, that you can use. So I remember when I was, I did so many different things at Staples, which I'm so grateful for. I was moving into the role of transportation. So, and it was all guys, and supply chain 20 plus years ago was all men and legacy men, right? So the guy in transportation started on the dock of the warehouse and then made his way into the truck and then made his way, onto the supervisory floor. So, and it was all about really, and I actually really enjoyed it because I don't take myself seriously. I take my work seriously. I take the responsibility of leadership seriously, but I do not take myself seriously. So I remember, and I knew these guys not really, really well, but I went into the meeting them all for the first time and knowing them, but not to the degree I would get to know them. And, along the way, I brought my son's truck book. I think I brought, like a mug of like fake beer or something. I mean, I did something really cutesy, but it was very professionally quick done. And I would just kind of walked in and said, I'm ready to do this job. And it just to kind of like, I'm sure some of them looked at me like, what the hell is she doing in here? Right. She doesn't know any of this stuff. And the reality is you don't need to know any of this stuff. You need to be able to absorb. You need to be able to learn. You need to be able to listen, ask the right questions. You need to have a humility to say, I don't know the answer to that without for a moment thinking that somehow that means you're less than.
That's exactly
right. It's not
right.
about that at all. It's about grabbing the moment with all your might and understanding you've got the disciplines. I know I'm really good at figuring things out. I know I can action a work plan that brings success to an organization. I know I can leverage the talents of other people because I pay attention, and that matters to me. And you get into your own with confidence, with energy, but it's okay if you don't know. And why not laugh at yourself a little bit, just to crack it open a little bit with the guys. And I'm still friends with many of them today. And I'm one of the guys. That's fine. They obviously, you know, I feel female. I don't feel like I've compromised myself, but I'm just fine to be one of the guys too.
For you.
Excellent.
I think for me, if I was able to conquer the fear earlier in my career, I would have found my voice sooner. I had to overcome a lot of fear of things around me, fear of what people thought about me, fear that I wasn't going to say the right thing. And I eventually got there. I don't know if it has to do with age or what, but you get to a point where I don't care what they think, you know what I'm saying? But conquering that fear, because if you don't, other people will become your voice and they will tell you who you are. And that is not a good place to be in.
You're absolutely right. Yes. And Lynn, how about you?
I know we're at the top of the hour, so I'll go quickly. Finding my voice, being available to problem solve, being available to take on tasks that others really don't want, that are gnarly, maybe, and others really are not so interested in. Having a high level of emotional and professional humility. These are all behavioral qualities and that will position you as someone that people won't feel threatened by. Moreover, they're much more likely to seek you out. And once, of course, you're being sought out, you're there. You're there. Your voice is being heard. But there are definitely different things that you can do, different tactics that you can deploy to enable people to get to know you better as someone who's going to get the job done.
Absolutely. I think showing up as your whole self is just so important. And I
Exactly.
feel like we have that opportunity more today than we ever had in the past. And so we should embrace that.
I agree with you, Michelle.
Yeah.
I do too. I think it's, absolutely, do I take my responsibility seriously? 180% I do. And my obligation to be a servant leader for those around me and that I feel blessed to be a part of, but you got to have fun along the way too. Work takes up a big part of our lives, and connecting with people and having an authentic camaraderie with people, that's the really special part of work as well, above and beyond delivering results.
So I could talk with you all for the next 3 hours, but unfortunately our time is up. So I just want to personally thank each and every one of you, Susan, Lillian, and Lynn. Thank you so much for joining today and really sharing your valuable insights and experiences in this really, really important topic. And I want to thank everybody on the webinar for joining us and being part of the conversation and sharing your questions with us. We really enjoyed having you here with us. Hopefully you can join us again for either a virtual or in-person event, and you can find those on our awesome website, which is www.awesomeleaders.org. So thanks again, and hope to see you all again soon.
Bye.
Take care.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.